this is not necessarily... So, I want to talk to you about a functioning political system. A functioning political system is not what you think it is. So, here's a functioning political system. So, how much did the politicians get paid back then in the world of magic? I'd say $1 trillion. That's why they did good, right? It's not direct payment, right? It would be in the form of yachts, right? It would be in the form of... Maybe they get a package deal of getting ported to another planet, right? That's why there's so many tarot cards and shit. They verified it. So, here, I'll give you an example. The sinking Titanic was pre-planned. So, I'll tell you a little tragic tale about the sinking Titanic, the occultic origins. It was pre-planned. They all decided to die and reincarnate to the next life. And the politician was supposed to plunder their gold. That was set up by the commoners. So, I played the SS Libra for Pokemon a while back, right? Yeah, it was pre-planned. That was why the engine started disrupting itself. It was not... The fault leak was pre-planned already as well. The politician was supposed to collect all that gold once it all sank, right? Their credit card statements and everything. Yeah, it was planned because the president who did good and functioned in the economy got a promise, right? It was a magic contract. Yeah, and that was the deal. And I don't know who the president was at the time. Might have been Taft or someone, but he says, okay, if you run the presidency good, right? I promise you can plunder all the resources, right? All the metals from the sinking the Titanic. You can sell it. Yeah, and the other ones got a contract, right? For saying, well, I can live a better life, and they're like, okay, I agree with that. Painful as fuck, but they all got a better life afterwards. No, you do that. You do this shit, right? That's why people were crazy back then. I put that in quotation marks. No one liked doing it, but you know, it made the presidency better. Yeah, and then you say, well, I'm a good guy now. Yeah, the money was there. People used to do a lot of crazy shit just to make sure the democracy functioned. So, I'll tell you a little truth. The democracy worked because there never was a two-party. It was a one-party system. The other side that lost was meant to be a checks and balances against the side that won. Oh no, no one was gonna. No one trusts the. No one. When you look at the Constitution, you look at the checks and balances. You're not supposed to take that literally. No, you know it's gonna fail. Like, who watches The Watchmen? Well, it's the losing party. Ever wonder why the Republicans can just stonehammer Obama so successfully? And you're not supposed to take that literally. It's implied the losing party be the best checks and balances, like all the losing parties. They drag the winning party down if you feel threatened by it, right? That was the game back then. So if the Democratic Party won, right? So that's how it worked. It functioned more like the free market. So the Democratic Party won. It was agreed upon that the Republican Party spent all their efforts dragging the Democratic Party down during the 4 years, right? And they would not drag them down if the Democratic Party did what the populace wanted them to do. You guys are kind of dick-fagging around too much these days. But anyways. Yeah, it's retarded now because people don't care. People don't care about this topic anymore. It's not a real issue to be concerned about, right? Yeah. So nowadays, I gotta think about this because I don't like talking about it, right? Because it was always a one-party system. But the joke was the other losing parties kept the destined winner, right, in check. It's like Yu-Gi-Oh! Championships, right? That was how democracy actually functioned. Now, why is that missing in today's history? It's because it's a reality no one wants to talk about. It's uncomfortable as fuck. So how was the winner predestined? They all daydreamed, right? So there's a reason why the ability to daydream was given to you by the rich. and makes communication seamless and a lot easier. So that's why I talk about anti-capitalism, because that was from the I think it's the anti-federalist or the federalist movement, right? Therefore, no government. So everything is that movement was supposed to keep the pro-government people in check, right? Back in 1776. Yeah, so that's why, and that's the best checks and balances that existed. Yeah, you're all doing democracy wrong, by the way, guys. So I don't think democracy. So that's the version of democracy. They weren't playing about it, right? A lot of people don't want to say that on paper. How do you say that on paper? Well, I decided the Democrats must win, right? That's what happened with Delano Roosevelt, right? The Republicans kept him in check, so that was the joke. Everyone would put their best policy ideas to that party, right? And if they didn't run that right, they kind of forgot about it, right? I gotta be careful of that bicyclist. So yeah, and how do you do that? You stonewall them. So how does this happen? Okay, let's start with what's his name? Roosevelt? Not the other one, the other one. The guy who's like carry a big stick or whatever. Yeah, there's like, hey, okay, that Republican was destined to win, right? Well, the Democrats are like, well, I want my policy ideas passed. The joke is, okay, I'm going to have this party win because they most align with my ideas, right? The market incentive is capitalism. I think they can push the system towards what I want to believe, right? The joke is the Democrats they know they were never going to get their ideas passed, but they can get their ideas passed closer if they elect him, right? They all agreed, like, okay, yeah, it's true, I don't agree with any other Republican tenets, but I know how they implement that change is going to make it more likely so my changes get implemented in the next cycle, right? People used to play these complex pyramid scheme games, right? Yeah, so Donald, in theory, right, it's true, you don't think any of this stuff makes sense, right? But, some of his policy ideas, right, we're going to push the dials a lot further towards your end. It's always been like that. Right? You're not supposed to take, like, his fascist ideas seriously. You're supposed to say, okay, is the results, like, does he make it likely for the government to get demolished, right? Right? You're looking at one outcome. Yeah. And the goal is your opposing party is supposed to negate the effects of the negative consequences of his presidency. You're supposed to look at the two-party system as a way of keeping one party in check. So this is a negate all. You're supposed to look at the framework as I'm supposed to negate all the negative consequences of the other party winning in the worst case scenario. And you're supposed to focus in on all the good, right? That the opposing party got. That's the whole point of having another party. It's supposed to get rid of all the negative consequences of having the opposing party win. It was an insurance policy. That's how you get what you want. You look at, and then you only get the good out of that party. So what would the good be? Well, it's capitalism, right? In this case, right? Whoever you want to get all the goods from the capitalism that you want, right? While getting rid of all the bad from the other party, right? Yeah, that's how you play the game. And and then that's where the compromise comes, right? Because you as a Republican, okay, I know the whole purpose of the opposing party is to keep me in check. So that forces me to negotiate with the other party. After they win, the negotiation starts after they get into the White House, right? Right? And how do you get rid of a Republican or anyone in the House? Well, as for the 4 years, instead of the 4 years terms, what you do is you use magic to get rid of them. You do coups all the time. That's how democracy became flexible. Do not focus on... It doesn't sound sexy. Do not focus on getting everything you want. Focus on getting rid of all the negative consequences of one party so you can make them more flexible. Yeah, and you do that by making their supporters more flexible. So once their supporters become more flexible, they become more flexible. Yeah, that's a better system than just, hey, look, right? I want to gain everything. Yeah, and once I gain everything, right? This is a very easy topic to talk about. Yeah, this is the democracy I want. Now, today's democracy, you can't do that now because everyone's so polarized. That's why the political compass wasn't as polarized back then, because people are actually forced to talk to each other during the 4 years, right? The 4 years did not necessarily mean they got everything wanted. It was the beginning of a negotiating. That's step one. Step two is haggling with the supporters from each side. That's why the Senate formed, right? In the House, right? So the joke was the quarreling with the supporters began in the House, inside the family home. Right? Their goal is to reduce the consequences of the opposing party winning, right? And the winning party knew they had to haggle with the opposing members. So the quarreling begins in the House, and then it floats up to the Senate. The Senate is when they start basically cussing outside the streets. Right? Now I'm sending the argument away. Right? You're debating, and then now the judiciary and the Supreme Court comes after you have some solid cases, right? You have some, it's like Reddit, right? You have some popular topics floating around. Yeah, I'm telling you plainly how the system actually functioned. No one was plain about it even for the Constitution. Now, why was the Second Amendment there? It was to make sure that the winning party actually compromises. You say, let's go dangerous. Nope, you can't get a low tax government. Nope, I don't want that, right? We're gonna have a real discussion now. Now, once you're threatening with a gun, right? Everyone threatens each other with a gun from both parties, right? We have a death duel. I'm a little flexible this time around. I can't get away with what I want, right? It's like, okay, you're rich, right? That's why you want more money. That's why you want low taxes. You're honest. You start with the honesty in the House, and then it goes to the streets, right? That's why it's the Senate, right? And then once you have some popular cases, then you take it to the courts. You start with the judicial course, right? Right? Because the opposing party is the judge, jury, and executioner, right? And then the Supreme Court comes when you feel like, and this is the hidden banger, right? The joke is the Supreme Court, secondly the judicial court. When you feel like your case isn't truly resolved and you want to take this fight outside to the next term, that's when it goes to the Supreme Court. So it's not supposed to be a bunch of politicians or lawyers fighting. It's supposed to be a bunch of people fighting. The Supreme Court is like, hey, look. Yeah, Supreme Court is basically, hey, look, we have a case. It's unresolved. And they really, really, really want to keep pushing. The joke is it's judicial, right? So people kind of bullshitted themselves for so long. The joke was you needed two courts because there were a bunch of cases from the last couple terms that weren't resolved, right? Like low taxes, high taxes, right? We couldn't trust the trade guilds to enforce the rules, right? So whatever cases that are unresolved from a decade or two ago, those are in the Supreme Court. That's the backlog, right? Ever heard of The Office? That's backlog work. And what's currently being discussed in the judicial court system, you couldn't talk about that because that's outside work, right? That's shadowlancing, right? That's what shadows do. That's what shadow people did back then. People voluntarily assumed the role of the crow, right? The role of the shadow. Today, I'm like, well, I can't get an actuarial science job. I might as well just tell the truth about this now. Yeah, nowadays, people actually believe that's how the system functioned. Like what is standard? No, it's not. It's always assumed there's other work done. That's why I don't like democracy, because they're not being honest. That never was how democracy functioned. It was always a one-party system. The other parties were brought up to keep that party in check. And that's how you truly start getting what you want. It's like a corporation, right? You get a CEO in, right? You reluctantly compromise, right? And the real democracy starts when you start attacking the CEO. It does not start with the election. You try to mold them. That's way more flexible. Sorry. Nope. 4 years. Nope. Not everything's decided by the end of 4 years. By when they resume presidency. It starts once you start stabbing the people, start stabbing the supporters, right? People used to do that, like back in the Roman times, and they did that back in the United States, right? People kind of forgot about it after 1776 because the Federalists were like, so the non-government supporters, like, they decided to give in because there was a looming threat, right? The ANCAP model couldn't work because the British colony, which is ran by the 19 Starseeds, right, were too powerful. You can't. If you're an ancapitalist society, I understood this pretty well. You cannot fight against a standing army without a centralized power. I don't agree with Stefan there. That's why they actually gave in. No, you can't. You can't harbor funds enough. Otherwise, why don't you just get bought off by the British colony? They can offer you better benefits. Don't you know a conquering army gives you better benefits? An anarcho-capitalist model. Right? That's why capitalism doesn't work, because now you have to give away your independence. You get more cheddar, right? Well, what if you prioritize earning money over independence? You could get bought off by a standing army, a bigger one, pretty easily. Right? Capitalism 101, right? That's why the conservative model, I'm like pretty skeptical, because aren't there cases where you're better off, you make more comfortable living being a slave? Now, if you have a government, in that case, it might be better being free. Right? It's not, there's no incentive to always be a free guy under capitalism. Now, if you have a government, right, to some extent, now you do have an incentive to be free. So you keep that as a checks and balances from people selling their freedom, right? Because you know there's a moral argument, right? There's no incentive to actually be free, if that makes sense. Because all they have to do is offer you a better benefits package. They don't have to do it. They just send an army, right? They say, hey, let's start our own business. You don't have to attack. Right? If the army outnumbers you. So I have a moral case, right? Yeah, capitalism in its full functionality, people will disagree with it, right? It's not always profitable being free. It might be profitable being a slave. And you get health insurance, you get dental, right? That's easy. You have a standing army, they can find it for you. They can threaten other people to give it to you, right? That's why anti-capitalism fails. So what do? Because I value freedom, right? So I want to get rid of the incentive of selling your freedom. So what do? I have the government enforce taxes, right? Now I have a standing army. I don't need a standing army. The incentive structure is gone. Right? Because you have another group of soldiers that say, "Hey, we're competing against you." That's why the government actually existed as a private entity. That's why they gave up. I put that in quotation marks. A deal was reached, right? So you negotiate by protesting, by burning houses. Negotiate dangerously. Yeah, so I don't support democracy as it is now because it's not actually how it actually functioned back then. I'd rather support something that actually is listed on paper. Right now, that's called dick fagging. People weren't even remotely playing about it. They say, oh, we got checks and balances, we got the Senate, but there are a lot of prerequisites they didn't talk about. You can literally run democracy with a private corporation these days, right? Government was actually like probably the first private corporation for the U.S., arguably. Now the reason why it's called public is public is basically all the private corporations give money to the government, no questions asked. When you invent that in an capitalist society, that's when it shifts, right? Yeah, that's what goes on these days. Now, why am I supporting that? Because you need to do that by default when everything goes to shit. I'm not doing it because I think it's the best system. I'm just doing it because that's a system that just keeps stuff running when you have a nuclear apocalypse. When you can't centralize, right? You decentralize. It's called the worst case scenario governance. It makes you the richest, though. Right? Worst case scenario, you keep kissing ass to the rich, right? That gives you the most leeway to the rich, right? Because if you give the most leeway to the rich or the most capable, don't they give you a job eventually? Right? Worst case scenario, you got to deal with how you're treated. Yeah, democracy is too much gaslighting. So Donald doesn't care about Twitter. If you're wondering why he can protect social media, he has no interest. He literally could have ran the presidency without Twitter. I want to talk about this now. He could have done email marketing pretty dangerously. So what he could have done is use Twitter, 2016. Just use it, and then once the White House there, give up using Twitter. Give control over divide the executive order among the YouTubers. He doesn't have to have a Twitter account. Do they fucking care about social media? No, they don't, right? Have Jimmy Dore or someone from the left just be in charge of UBI when COVID-19 hits, right? He'd have to learn how to politically time stuff, right? So what you give it to the progressives, you trust me, see what happens. Right? You say, hey, look, I know the progressives, right? Throw over some red meat, and I agree on this topic, and you too, Trump supporters, that's how you play the game. Right? We're sort of for socialism. Let's see a bit away. I want a free market solution to socialism. That forces Jimmy to actually think. Or Cenk, right? I actually have to think about this now. I can't just shout from my soapbox. I'm getting actual power for once. Tell the truth. The truth is, hey, even if we pass a bill which has everything you want, that doesn't mean people are going to enforce it. That's the real dirty part of politics. That's why it's a waste of time. Now you have to think about how to actually get the results you want. Right? Because the private corporations actually fund the police indirectly. Think about it. If you're Cenk, right, you say, hey, I want universal health care. Does that mean it actually is going to get enforced? That's the real dirtiness of politics. That's why you see a lot of omnibus bills, because they're being more honest about what's going on. Seriously, you know how dirty politics is. You could literally say, hey, I want universal health care. Does that mean it's going to happen? Look at what happened to Common Core, right? It didn't get enforced. That's the dirtiness of politics. Now, it's just because it's stated on paper doesn't mean people are actually going to do it. People can just defect, right? They can have their own pyramid scheme system and just defect and not enforce any of the laws. That's why you get these shitty omnibus bills, because they're a reflection of reality. People used to be more dishonest. So by having omnibus bills, you're having more honesty. You find that out. Donald can just straight up say, hey, now he probably doesn't actually understand how the government works. That's my guess. That, hey, you can pass whatever, hey, let's pass universal health care. Guess what? No one's going to follow it. None of the people that actually need to help you, like, enforce that law are going to follow that rule because they're bought off by a bunch of lobbyist groups. You know what the lobbyist groups are going to do? They're going to force the police not to enforce it, right? They don't know what that means. Now you say that, it's like, okay, now I have to really think about this, right? I may have to settle. Now Jimmy can tell, or Cenk can tell his followers, okay, the reality is you can literally pass a bill and it actually looks like you're not saying what you mean, right? You can literally say, hey, I want, like, free healthcare for all, but none of the government agencies will actually enforce that because they need their share of political dough. No, seriously, you can say, hey, I tried. It's on paper. Doesn't mean anything. It really doesn't. That's why you see these. And so if you want something that's close to what I want, right? We may need to do an omnibus bill. A lot of the fans will be like, okay, now I'm starting to see politics kind of sucks now. I might opt out. But because Donald's here and he's having this transparent conversation, I want to see if I can get anything in the meanwhile, right? He's there for 4 years. I need to do something. I have an opportunity, right? Because he's the only one who opened this transparent conversation. Right? Yeah. And the other reality is that even if I pass this, right, and Jimmy, and you can say that, if he could honestly tell that to the Democrat, right, you still have to compromise with Trump supporters because they want to keep their gold, right? Now they're like, now I have to change because as much as I want these things, I still have to talk to the Republican, right? He wants to keep some profit margin. Now suddenly, as much as I want anti-abortion, right, this guy right here is going to pay someone to sabotage me. Now, I still want this. Now it starts becoming a video game debate, a video game product debate, right? I can't. I want some of these states to have anti-abortion. Now you force the Trumps, the supporters, to talk to each other. It's like, okay, now I have to compromise. Yeah, we disagree with each other. We need to compromise for some leeway. Now it's not related to the government. It's like, yeah. And it's like, well, you know, the senators, they don't really want to talk. They want to. They're all concerned about their profit motives. You're forcing them to talk. Okay, yes, it's true. Now you don't have to talk to the Senate. Now it's distilled to, let's have a chat with the senators. You don't need Twitter for that. You just have the YouTubers give them power, and it's like, okay, as much as I want pro-abortion, you tell the supporters about that. As much as I want this shit, here are the roadblocks that are fucking in my way, right? Just because a bill's passed, right? That's what's going on with politics in a nutshell. Doesn't mean it gets enforced, right? That's the trick with omnibus bills. It's the same with omnibus bills too, right? It's like networking for a job. Doesn't mean anything happens, right? It's like when you submit a job resume, right? The recruiter, the whoever is in charge of enforcing the bill, doesn't have to tell the truth. Well, our goal is to make sure what's legibly stated on paper actually gets enforced. Now, suddenly, you as a supporter is like, well, I want democracy, but at the same time, I actually want what's on the bill listed supported. So who do you talk to? You talk to these middlemen. You say, hey, why is it you don't want to enforce any of this shit, right? Well, the reality is I can't do that because I'm bought off by lobbyists X, Y, and Z, right? You have the supporters engage in a topic conversation, and you're like, well, Donald's here. He's the first one that forced a transparent conversation. I really think I may be anti-abortion depending on the states, right? Because you're saying if I'm anti-abortion for these states, I can get cheaper healthcare elsewhere. And now I have a job as a programmer. Now you suddenly bring other topics up because now other variables start getting thrown into play. That is how you get everyone to, quote, agree on the same boat, right? Right? You see where we truly agree on. It's money, right? Sure, I'm anti-abortion, but you're saying I could get, because now they have to offer something to you, right? But you're saying I could get a pay raise next month? I may have to be flexible on my belief, right? And the other guy's like, yeah, I might be anti-abortion too, but I'm willing to be pro-abortion if I'm willing to get a pay raise on this month, right? Jimmy gets an exit ramp. He's like, as much as I love to enforce these political principles, right? Because he has to take more risk, right? Because he's sharing executive authority. He's like, I may want lower taxes in Alabama, right? I'm sorry. I have to think about myself. What about you guys? Yeah, I got to really scratch my head and think about this. Sure, I can get exactly what I want enforced in Congress. That's an awkward conversation. Or what's on paper, but what's on paper doesn't mean it happens in reality. It's like a sales pitch. That's why all the bills don't work. They're all sales proposals. They don't mean anything. That's why Donald can pass omnibus bills, because they don't mean anything, right? When's the last time infrastructure bill actually did anything? Aren't the roads still declining? You want results to appear. You don't, just because you have something on a bill gets passed doesn't mean anything happens. Honestly, you might as well just apply for a scholarship fund, right? Doesn't matter how short the bill is, doesn't mean how long the bill is, doesn't mean anything gets passed. Anything happens. Social Security is a good example. Nothing happened to me. Right? Just because I submitted shit, right, doesn't mean anything happened. Same thing for Job Corps. That's the problem with politics in a nutshell. Forget the complexity. Does anything happen? Why do you think the politicians take a break? Because they all know the truth. Doesn't matter how short the bill is, doesn't mean how long the bill is. Nothing gets enforced. The trick for you is to figure out, how do I get this enforced? And then Tucker Carlson can have some share of executive authority, right? He doesn't need Twitter for that shit. Hey, Tucker, do some email marketing for me. That's how you get out of Twitter. That is how he doesn't have to care. He has connections. He has money. He didn't even have to use Twitter. You know what he could have done? He could say, hey, you YouTubers, campaign for me. I'll give you a sales proposal. I guarantee 20% returns. He'll say no thanks because he's more interested in making himself richer. That's how you use Twitter. Twitter is one of the best marketing platforms. I got that from Donald, by the way. He just doesn't know how to explain half of his stuff. I'm telling you competently right now, no, you don't need social media. Just give power to the YouTubers or social media market influence. Hey, you are my infrastructure bill, Kanye West. You are in charge. You give him some guarantees, right? Whatever you decide, that's what I'm passing, right? Right, hola, here you go. Kanye's like, okay, I really need to think about this. You can't be a left-wing asshole, right? I put that in quotation marks because the people who enforce the bill think you're a left-wing asshole. And he'll make sure they'll say it live to them. I think you're a left-wing asshole. I don't know. I'm scratching my head, right? I don't know how else to put it. I don't want to enforce any of this. Because I'm not making any money when I do this, right? Well, now the taxpayer, like, where's the money actually going? It just goes to the military. Maybe if you can guarantee me a military contractor job, I'll think about it. That's why all the bills are complex. They're trying to hide the fact that none of this actually gets enforced. None of it gets enforced. That's why there's a bunch of paperwork, because the reality is none of it gets enforced. There go jobs that get it enforced. They all understood that back then. It's how to get it enforced that's the problem. So what is the omnibus a reflection of? It's a reflection of various lobbyist groups knowing that they all want a slice of the capitalist pie. It's not a reflection of what actually gets passed, if that makes sense. It's a reflection of how the supply chain system works. None of it is a reflection of what actually gets passed into law. So the omnibus bill, well, you need a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Those are people that are like saying, well, I want control over these parts of the government. That's how you interpret it. That's all what it's always been. That is not a reflection of what actually happens when that bill gets passed. Now, what actually happens is what each branch of the government and the private corporations do after they get that cheddar. That's what actually happens. That's not necessarily what that bill says. When you're after they get their cheddar, they decide what the outcome of that bill is, right? That's why the bill is hard to understand, because that's their supply chain of operations. So every time they pass a bill, the popular bills that get passed, they're just talking about the current the current supply chain, the global supply chain. They're not talking about the bill. Now, no, seriously. So you don't say what you mean when you pass that bill. You could very well get universal health care with the current omnibus bill, right? Because the result you want is universal health care. The bill, what's stated on the bill is not the result. So how do you do that? You talk to them. None of them are interested in universal health care, by the way. Now, if Donald ran his term properly, yeah, you could talk to them. It's like, I'm not really interested. I can give you what you want if you promise me a job, right? Right? I can give you UBI or universal health care for this state, but some of you guys are going to have to run a business to guarantee mandatory universal health care. You got to protect some rich people. That's where the conversation, they will go there. Because these people are greedy fucks. So read all the popular bills. Those are just a reflection of the global supply chain. The omnibus bills anyways. Not a reflection of what's passed. What's actually implemented. So too is the Second Amendment, right? Well, not Second Amendment, but gun control. Right? Ever wonder why it's not always enforced? So what it's saying for gun controls, like certain states, it's just saying that a lot of us do not profit from a pro-gun law. It's too expensive to enforce guns. That's all it is. It's not a reflection. That's not a guarantee gun control is actually enforced. There's going to be exceptions, right, where the private corporation that enforces that will allow for pro-Second Amendment. Yeah, that does not mean it actually got passed, if that makes sense. So just because no, it's serious. So how do you do it? So California has pro-gun control, like pro-gun control, right? That's because it doesn't help the current corporations that have control over the Congress make money from anti-gun control law, right? So it actually does not get enforced under certain circumstances. That's actually what's going on. People just kind of forgot about it. So if the good news for a company, if you're trying to move out of California, you don't have to enforce it. You just say, I'm withdrawing some cash. I'm going to talk to my intermediaries. I'm not enforcing jack shit. You say, hey, policeman, I don't have to give you money. I actually am responsible for 20% of your paycheck. Don't enforce it. And then it's like, oh, I see what's going on. So, yeah, it's like, I don't have to enforce jack shit. Like, okay, well, we got a pro gun control area, right? Everyone's shooting at each other. I'm serious. That's why there's complexity. People just want to hide. They put a bunch of adjectives because they're trying to describe their global supply chain. And if hey, global supply chain, that sounds like a bill, right? Just pull some bullshit. It's called email marketing. You're just saying, hey, look, that's how the bill's passed. No, that's how my global supply chain operation works. You just conflate the two. You know what a conflation is, right? There are no such thing as bills. The bill comes, so after you get Donald, you get everyone to negotiate together. You have them, all the supporters talk with each other, because you don't have to panic. After you win, that's when the real democracy starts. Now, if they don't like you, say, we'll just organize a coup. We'll screw around with the paperwork and say that your 4 years your term. It's like, well, he only has that 2 years. No, you don't. So how do your years get registered? It gets registered in a computer database somewhere, right? You just fudge it. If you can manipulate elections, can't you fudge the years or how long they stay? Private corporations do pretty shifty shit with the employees they don't like, right? They make up bogus charges. Just go and do that. Make it transparently obvious on a YouTube live stream. Yeah, you just do that and just say, hey, I don't like this senator. I believe his 4 years are up. Nope. He won 4 years ago. He's up, right? He's gone. Bye. Fuck you, right? Get intermediaries who say, well, I'm in charge of the government database. You're gone. Forget term limits. Your term limit's up already. You're done for. That's how you do it. Doesn't matter what bills you pass. All right, you're on food stamps. Bye now, man. You don't have to worry about term limits. People did that back then. What they did is they pulled out the paperwork and they erased it. That's why it doesn't mean anything. That's why I'm saying the bills don't mean shit. They did that back then. Got some politicians like, yeah, we agree. We'll let you have access. Let's go erase some paperwork. I'm telling you. So they conflated two. The joke was they had a lie. They couldn't tell the truth exactly because it's cleaner. The joke was everyone knew the truth outside of the Congress, right? The entire 50 states was D.C. In the cleaner version, everyone agreed it was clean because it would be too complex if they told the whole truth, right? They're doing it through stages. Could Nancy have gone, well, she would have made the same money, right? But she would have to do harder work. Right? Now, the joke was because it's like bidding. You make a first aggressive counter offer. You made a first aggressive offer. The other countries will withdraw psychologically, right? They won't make the same bid. It's like, well, he's offering a price. I think I'll look elsewhere. Well, it looks like good cash. I'll do it anyways. That's normal sales negotiation. Make an aggressive first offer. The other buyers aren't going to do anything. They did not say that on paperwork because that is ugly and people generally don't like being plain about anything. The plainness back then happened in the conversations outside. Yeah, the entire Constitution is just a dishonesty lie fag test. Yeah, you pass a bill, doesn't mean anything gets implemented. Just like back then. They just added more you just add more paperwork because everyone hates each other. Yeah, so you can literally, that's why there's an alternative to democracy. I'd rather because right now, at this point in time, democracy doesn't exist. It's just ran by a bunch of Fortune 500 companies. You might as well just start electing better CEOs at this point to bump the stock price up. Hey, maybe they'll give you universal health care. It's like, well, if I don't make enough, it's no thanks. But if you get a more hungrier CEO, right? Your goal is to give more chance to CEOs that are less qualified. They have to give more leeway. Provide universal health care to the whole county, right? That's how it functions now anyways. None of these bills have to be enforced. People play really nasty tricks. Like, sometimes the company was like, ooh, I made a data error. What? I'm still employed in the system, right? I got my little work badge card. You just keep playing games like that. That's how you make it work. If you can do it in the office, you can definitely do it in DC. No, nothing. The joke is nothing in paper gets implemented. Yeah, so Jimmy, or idealists like Jimmy and Mark Dice would have to, I may have to entertain left-wing ideas because they tell the same story, right? It's like, oh, I know what this game is. Yikes. Oh, I feel like I need some water. Oh, so what's on paper doesn't mean it actually happens. Oh, okay. Well, I'm willing to negotiate. Some of you guys want pro-gun zones, right? Do I get a pay raise? I'm willing to negotiate about this. Okay, yeah, sometimes I need to allow for the alt-right to rise in some of these left-wing states. Yeah, I'm okay with that. Yeah, I only care about the cheddar in the end. Do you have a sustainable path to middle class? Can I get free education for some of these states? I'm willing to travel remote. Now you have a legitimate conversation. Right? Okay, the bill can say the same. I put that in quotation marks because the joke is nothing on the bills actually, You don't even have to change bills. So whatever ends up in that negotiation is the final draft of the bill, right? Does not have to put it up in Congress because once the intermediaries change their mind, right? They'll have it listed in either their head or it's on paper somewhere. Everyone will have a copy of it, Google Docs collaboration. And that'll be the actual implementation of the law. Doesn't matter what was passed on Congress. That's what you do. That's why the paperwork's complex. Now, why would you pass the official version? It's just to show the paperwork that something was passed. It was just a rough idea. That's what happened back then. That's all you do. Because because the rough draft, it's just a way of saying, well, something happened. That's what happens in the corporation all the time, right? Something happened. It's just to keep headcount over the bills. That's all you do. And so what ends up happening is the political sphere, right? If Donald divides his power, which is the right thing to do. Donald would have made more money in the end, actually. Right, so here's Donald's payoff. Can you guys bump my Mar-a-Lago real estate business up? Too much risk for Donald. It would have happened. Doesn't matter how his term did. Because he was the first one to implement a transparent system. Donald would not think like that. Do you know why? Donald likes to stick with what's comfortable to him. You know who would do it? People like my dad. Donald does not share power. He likes it. His marketing team likes to stick with what's comfortable, not risky whatsoever. Because he's the first one who told you how bills actually fucking work. You wouldn't even have to be that plain about it. He would have figured out indirectly. That would have not been able to be simply described. So that's why politics is like a sausage. You don't want to know what's in it. It's because, and Otto Warmbier wasn't even direct about it either. It's because what's passed isn't actually implemented. That's disgusting. So for all you know what you could list on the bill? You could just list, you don't even have to list what's on the bill. You could just list a global supply chain. And say, hey, that's the bill for anti-abortion, right? Hey, that's weird. Well, how come I can't understand that law? Right? You say, well, that is anti-abortion. What are you talking about? Like, people lie all the time, right? You ever seen those spam mails? Because omnibus bill or any bill reads like a spam email, right? When you think about it, it's like, oh, that's not anti-abortion law. And now the politician who bullshits, right? Well, that doesn't sound like anti-abortion at all. No, yes, it does. It's just a lot of let's just watch this is how they fib. This is anti-abortion. What are you talking about? It's just that some states don't agree to enforce it. Some states, well, here's how you make an omnibus bill. Some states, right, which is you're talking about the companies in private, right, agreed to enforce abortion, and then some of them agreed to enforce anti-abortion. There you go. Now anti-abortion becomes an omnibus bill in itself. Some of them want, like, well, I want anti-abortion. Well, some of them, the anti-abortion bill is actually a collection of, what do we call it? It's a collection of people who want YMCA facilities to open up, right? Isn't that what an omnibus bill is? Yeah, they're really not talking about anti-abortion. Right? It's like infrastructure. Infrastructure bill. Hey, look, I just want my roads funded. Wouldn't that be the end of it? That's all it is. It's just, they're not even describing the bill. You just slap omnibus on it, and an email and a pyramid scheme could literally be written there. You just call it an omnibus bill. You say, well, the anti-abortion bill you see, that's an omnibus bill now, because I'm talking about who gets a slice of the road, right? So there's some traffic zoning laws, there's some hospital, and you just say, well, all these traffic zoning laws, well, you just justify and say, well, these traffic zoning laws just help the hospital bills get cheaper. That means there's more chances that you can get free anti-abortion. Meanwhile, in this state, right, yada, yada, yada. Doesn't that sound like an omnibus bill? That's how you turn an anti-abortion law into an omnibus bill. Like, well, this state of California in this one district, right, this city of California, right, like San Francisco, wherever the fuck it is, I don't keep track of the states. They want they're anti-abortion, but this other city is pro-abortion, right? And this other city is anti-abortion, and this other city is pro-abortion, and then the next 5 cities are pro-abortion. Now all of a sudden, like, well, that's technically anti-abortion, but you're listing all the private corporations that are actually enforcing it, and instead of calling them private corporations, right? This is called global supply chain sales gambit. It's actually part of the government, right? And the original revision has, well, here are the list of companies that actually can control this government, right? That's an omnibus bill. Like, well, but overall, because most of the companies are in favor of anti-abortion, that's my guess of what it is, are for anti-abortion, therefore that's an anti-abortion bill, right? The joke is to say, well, the majority of these counties are for anti-abortion. There you go. And they're sort of fibbing. They're not sure if they actually want to support it. That's a global supply chain, and that's not an actual implementation of the bill. That is why you do not want to know what's in it, because the reality is nothing you state gets implemented. It's like Senator Amidala back in the early Star Wars Episode 1. The Trade Federation controls everything, right? It's a trade, right? Omnibus bill is a trade, right? It's a negotiation between multiple other factions that are not listed on paper. The agreement is you do not list it because they do not want to get poked by the public. Now, if you're Donald, it doesn't matter how successful it is, right? He would have gotten like a 5 times growth on his Mar-a-Lago real estate. No, seriously, that is the right response. It doesn't matter how if the moment he makes that transparent, that nothing in the bill stated actually gets passed, he wins. Doesn't matter how his term goes, because the reality is that's why Obamacare couldn't get passed, because the Republicans Obama got funded, right? But the Republicans offered a better sales proposal to Obama's actual lobbyist groups. That's the real reason. Like, nothing in his bill gets stated. He figured that out plainly, right? It's like Yancey probably gave him a transparent conversation. He just couldn't understand it that plainly because it's terrifying. Yancey basically said, well, Obama, we can pass it. We can pass exactly what's stated. Nothing gets enforced. That's basically what Nancy basically said. Obama's like, well, that's a waste of time. I'd rather just blame Nancy's just like, here's an exit strategy, right? This is how a politician talks. Let's just blame the Republicans. Why don't we pass, instead of a cleaner version, let's pass a dirty version and say the Republicans made the omnibus bill, right? Because the more complexity you add in the system and the less the public understands what the fuck's going on, the more we can smear the other side. Because people just take shit out of context. How about that, Obama? Yeah, I'm okay with that. That's basically what happens in any of these discussions. Yeah, just have the... No, I'm sorry. Nancy would never say that directly, because a lot of people, when they teach you shit, right, they can't simplify stuff. I'm explaining it simply. The overall gist of, despite how complex the government is, nothing you say in the bill actually gets enforced. Now, why are pro-gun laws, why are pro-gun control zones are enforced now? Because a lot of corporations don't know how to simplify what they're doing. They don't know what they're doing. Now, you don't have to enforce any of those zones now, right? If you're making less money in California, right, because you have pro-gun zones, you just say, hey, I'm in control of your paychecks, don't enforce it. Have a little conversation with them. If you do enforce it, my paychecks are going to dry up. Okay, bye now. Now they know what's going on. Doesn't matter how much paperwork you add, right? I'm the one paying them shit, right? If you have pro-guns, the property prices get cheaper, right? Now it doesn't matter what's on paper. You just get a bunch of corporates like, hey, I actually pay this politician like 50% of his dough. You can even talk to the politician. Now, anytime you see a pro gun control on police like, okay, I got it. I'm not enforcing anyone. I'm going to have a transparent conversation with the citizenry. We get all richer. Bye. Now you take advantage of the system. Now the system works as it's intended to, despite the complexity is just there to sell you a bullshit sales proposal. It's kind of like buying an automobile from a car dealership. Yeah, people don't want to be playing about that. So you get Donald, you get Mark Dice, you get Steve Bannon. Like, even he can be in charge. He doesn't even have to be appointed anywhere. Now, you don't have to appoint anyone, Donald. You know who do you appoint? You just appoint the same people as the rhinos. You know what the rhinos do? They get clued in that it's all about cheddar. Rhinos like, okay, I can settle with less sales. You're right. You won fair and square. Sure, I can go for more expensive, stab you in the back, but you're going to have all my connections. You're going to have the social media influencers spam fake news about me to my connections, right? So I can't get another job. I'm okay with settling for a lower profit margin. I'm okay with 5%. That's fine. And it's not 80, right? But I'm okay with that. It's fucked up, but you want fair and square. It happens. Now, the private corporation is like, well, I benefit more this time around because my customers aren't you guys. Maybe you can make your sales back through commission fees. I'm sorry. It's like, yeah, that's fine. That's okay. I want you to make your money back, but I want you to do harder work for me. So you don't really lose anything. I want you to take more profitable ventures that you normally would not do. All the dinos, right? Is that what you call it? The rhinos? The dinos are the left-wing rhinos, right? It's like, okay, yeah, I get it. You now have more leeway to force me to do work that I don't want to do. So too do the Chinese, right? Not Xi, but the Chinese system. I want you to help me break free from Xi's Chinese zoning laws. Now, before I had less leeway, they would piss him off, but that's just what it is. I want you to help free my Chinese e-commerce ass-fag Alibaba friends. I get my money still. It's like, okay, I gotta wipe my forehead. I didn't want to do it before. Now I have to do it. It's gonna be a cough, right? Donald, you won fair and square. Here, bring me over. Let's have a transparent conversation with social media influencers. I'll take one for the team. Let's implement some bullshit which actually helps you get you to your goal faster. Let's pass a pro gun let's pass a gun-free zone, right? Well, and in return you get universal health care. Now, some of these states will start to say, well, I'm okay with that actually. If that means I get cheaper health insurance premiums, right? Get UBI immediately. I'm okay with carrying a gun. Right? People don't say what they mean all of a sudden, right? Because you're looking at your priorities, the consequences, right? Because all the intermediaries who basically run the economy are now having a very solid, transparent conversation. Now you can run a business for me. Suddenly you're like, okay, I actually don't want that. They gotta do this, right? Gotta put their glasses up, thumb their nose. Suddenly a lot of support's like, well, I started off being super idealistic. Then I realized I have to talk to a lot of these market actors, right? Who actually enforce the law. And suddenly I actually changed my mind. Yes, the idea is I want all of this, right? But I think there are some other incentives I care about more. That's the joke. You don't know what you want because you don't know what the consequences of it are, right? Now everyone understands, and then that's how you start building complexity, right? Because everyone's like, well, I want this and that. In exchange, I want that and that, right? I'm willing to compromise there. It's basically, audio comes from, hey, I'm compromising some of my values, and everyone's compromising different values depending on city-state, and that's how the bill grows in complexity. Until it resembles nothing of what it originally was. Like, right, when you achieve a goal, it's simplified, right? But how you go about achieving it becomes complex. And the bill will be a reflection of the methodology used to achieve that goal. That becomes your new omnibus bill that helps you the most. That's what Donald should have done, right? We all list the separate components of the omnibus bill in the YouTube comments section, right? Jamie's like, okay, I'll look over this once every 5 days. We'll decide on whether the police want to enforce it or not, right? And now he may have to defer to Cenk too. Now Cenk might say, if it makes you feel better, I married a right winger, right? It's okay to bring that up now. We all have to compromise. Like, yeah, I'm a left winger. I married a right winger too. I have to think about this. Scratch my head. People would have to change their mind, and then everything in polarization would go away, right? Because you start realizing, well, because there's consequences, right? I have to care about now. I can get stuff. I understand what actual levers I need to push to get some of the things I prioritize more over others, right? And it's like, oh, it's actually a one-party system. Well, I can opt out of politics, yeah, but I kind of want like no government at this point. But I know I need to pay these people off first, right? I can't just get rid of them because the private corporation can just have them as my new CEO in chief, right? Because they can just be paid to resolve office politics. I can do that, or I can reassign them to help me get a mandatory pay raise for my company, right? Because that's what's going to be offered, right? Why fire them when they can help me somewhere else? They don't like the work. Just have them talk, and then Donald defers his authority, and by the end of his 4 years, right? They say, hey, Donald, I know you sacrificed a lot. You didn't make any money, but I'm willing to buy. I don't care what the price tag is, right? You respect him now. I'm willing to stay in your hotel for the next couple decades, right? Right? Some of them will take one for the team, right? And we'll rotate, right? Have some of the social, I'll market for you, right? I'll help you set up business shop elsewhere, right? I'll help you sell Gucci purses, right? What the fuck it is, right? I don't want to sell you a real estate. That's too expensive, Donald. How about I sell you products from other stores? You just buy some Arrowhead bottles, right? And you can charge the premium. We'll buy it for the next decade or so. We'll be your loyal customer, right? That's how Donald makes his money back. Donald doesn't play that game because his family is not the niceness guy, right? But I would have, because that's how Congress works. You don't pass what you say is going to be passed. And like I said, reiterate it. You pass what stuff the company is willing to compromise in exchange for sort of enforcing the rules. Yeah, that's just what you do. And then now eventually you say, well, this is too complex. I want to shelve it. Okay, that's fine. How do you get rid of complexity stuff? You just have the programmers manipulate data, saying, well, you truest you stay 1 year, but I think you stay for 4 years. That's an accounting error. Eventually, when data gets so common, the politician will get it, right? Yeah, I get it. You want me out. Okay, let's have a transparent conversation. No need for term limit doesn't mean anything. Complexity comes when nothing means nothing, right? Nothing means what they say it means. Those are just cheat codes. Think of those as people you need to talk to make the bill swing in your direction. Yeah. Yeah, that's all you have to do. Anyways, nice conversation. I will chat with you later. I overstayed my welcome.